Carolyn McLean, public relations consultant specializing in crisis communications, specifically in the amusement industry and the amusement park atmosphere. Thanks so much for joining us on the Attraction Pros COVID-19 video series. How are you today?
I'm great. And I've been following both of you on many chats and Twitter live blah blah blahs and Facebook and LinkedIn. You guys are awesome.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate that. Thanks for following, and thanks for the engagement, and more importantly, thanks for chatting with us today. We definitely are looking forward to tapping into your background and your expertise as far as what's going on right now. So, as we kind of dive in this, can you just tell us a little bit about kind of what are you working on these days with your clients, or to give us kind of a general overview of what your main area of focus is right now throughout this crisis?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for me is that there's no playbook for this pandemic. So it's not, you really can't, it's really not 9/11. You know what I'm saying? It's its own crisis and nobody saw it coming, and it was like the 1-2 punch. So the thing that my colleagues and I are doing the most is drawing upon best practices from past crisis situations. But what I'm really learning is don't be afraid to get it wrong. We're trying things, and if it's wrong, then we'll pivot. But right now, we're testing the waters on so many different things. And I keep telling people that say, "Are you sure about this move?" I'll say it's kind of like, think about the greatest athletes, like Billie Jean King, good tennis champ, right? And Billie Jean King said, champions keep playing until they get it right. So from people in my field, that's really what we're doing right now. But the problem that I'm seeing is that everybody has put out their messaging, about protecting the health and the safety and the wellness of those around you. But that's old news, right? That's old news. That was phase 1. And now we're right in the thick of phase 2. So it's, what can we do now? What can we do now? So we're right now, what we're doing is we're pivoting and we're planning for the future.
Sure. So what are people not doing right now out of hesitation of saying, I don't want to do this from a PR standpoint or communication standpoint, out of fear of getting it wrong?
Well, right now, what we're telling folks to do is communicate with your employees. So everybody's always so top of mind about external communications. They forget about internal communications. And so we're utilizing Facebook and Slack and the intranet to reach out to our employees who may have been laid off or may be worried about their jobs or are asking the questions, when can I reopen my park? What do I do about the staff I can't afford? How can I make rent? Will my landlord allow me to defer? So what we're trying to do is keep the lines of communication open with our franchise owners, such as Urban Air Adventure Park in this regard, or other companies. We're just saying, hey, put out a newsletter, put out a really informal, conversational tone. Don't fuel the hysteria. Don't use colorful adjectives, because everybody's already, full of anxiety. So it's, what can we do to calm you down, keep you collected, and keep you focused and forward looking?
So I'm curious, as you talk about the communication with employees, because they could be kind of all over the board too in terms of their reaction and what's going on with them. So what are some of those specific messages that you would say to a company that you should be communicating? And this is kind of two-part, because there's those messages, but then are there things that companies are saying, well, I don't want to say anything because I don't know anything?
So what we'll do is, that's great. We'll do Zoom meetings and we'll do a chat room, and you can remain anonymous, but we'll just open the floor for 1 hour every day. And the CEO and the senior leadership team can bat back and forth Q&A. So it's very off the cuff. It doesn't look like a prepared statement to the employees in any way. It's just, here I am. And this is key, by the way, in all communications, especially right now, more than ever, to be transparent. If you don't know, you say you don't know. You just try and be as honest and open, because like I said, there's no playbook. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, right? It's a breakneck news cycle right now. Every day I wake up and I scan everything. I get the latest numbers. I see who's doing layoffs, who has rifts, what are they saying, what's the tone of voice, and I think a lot of companies are getting it right, by the way, with their tone of voice. I mean, they're just saying, look, I'm looking at mid-May before we're opening Six Flags or the Cedar Fair parks. So that gives us all an indication in the amusement park industry for FECs, we're in this for the long haul.
Yeah, and when you say there's no playbook, it means that the playbook's really being built as it goes, right? So what are some of the key kind of feeders into this playbook? You said you're making comparisons to previous crises. What are, I guess, some kind of common elements that are being found that are at least being used as a guiding light towards building the playbook for this?
So at Urban Air, at least, we're trying to keep our guests engaged. And this would go for anybody with a stakeholder, right? How do you keep your clients, or if you're in the service industry, like restaurants, your patrons, how do you keep them engaged right now so that when you open those doors, you've been conversing with them this whole time and they're ready to come back to you. And so it's finding creative ways, such as Facebook Live. Social media has been, such a godsend for all of us, right? To be able to communicate, see, talk, speak, and have a conversation with those people that have been spending money at your establishments. For Michael Browning, he calls kids that had canceled birthday parties. A few hours is every day, and says, hi, I'm the CEO. I'm the one that founded Urban Air, and I understand that we had to cancel your birthday party, and I'm really sorry about that. But I want to wish you a happy birthday, and sometimes it's a belated happy birthday, and our party room will be ready for you when you're ready for us. So it's using your senior leadership team, your top executives, for certain messaging. Don't just neglect them. They aren't there for the big important statements. They're there for the small stuff is so important right now.
Can you talk a little bit about tone? Because there's such a tone that goes through written communication, certainly the things we see online, but obviously as people are talking and doing videos and Zooms and things like that. So what is an appropriate tone that people should be kind of going for at this point?
The tone that you don't want to go for is like the PIO tone, the public information officer that comes out and it's just the facts, ma'am. You really want to come out there and just speak from the heart. Tell them what you do know. Tell them what you're doing today. Tell them that you don't know what tomorrow brings. But the one thing that is so important is to keep showing hope and resiliency through this.
So what does that look like or sound like if you were advising a Michael Browning or a CEO, and they themselves are uncertain? That's a big part of leadership is making the uncertain seem certain. So how do you coach them to be hopeful and resilient even when that may not be how they're feeling?
Well, that's great. That's a great question. They're leaders because they're leaders, right? So they already have it in there. It's already in their DNA. But sometimes even, the most powerful leaders need a pat on the back or need an extra, you got this. And I really think that preparation is key for that. Sometimes I've seen people I've seen them go out and think that they're going to deliver a great message off the cuff. And I am not a believer in that. I'm a believer in 2 to 3 key messages in a conversational tone. And you actually do practice them, but they sound conversational because you have practiced them. So staying on message right now is very important. Not going too far off the cuff with what you believe might happen, what you think could happen, because we just don't know.
Right, and that's that's one thing that I've always heard from a crisis communication standpoint is avoiding speculation at all costs, and not saying things like we think it might be this, or we think that there will be that. But with that said, there's still so much unknown and so much so many moving parts with this situation. How can these leaders or executives be able to deliver these statements without it appearing speculative?
Well, let's just talk about actions speak louder than words. We've heard that, right? That coined phrase. for my urban air team, the biggest action that they've shown, and I think, speaks to their leadership, is that they're foregoing their salaries. And I think that, to all of the franchise owners and all of the full-time employees and all of us at the, in the corporate office, at the home office in Dallas, we're like, wow, I mean, it could be a while before they get paid. It could be. I think that actions speak volumes. And if there are things that you can do within your company right now, and it really just, I don't know, it kind of brings everybody together. It's like not one person is suffering. We're all kind of suffering.
Yeah, I like that sentiment that we're all in this together. We're hearing that a lot, whether it's talking about sharing information or like you talked about that, we're all suffering in some way, shape or form, that we all really are in this together. So I think that's a great message, not only for what we're saying, but also, like you said, the actions and what we're doing too.
I will say this too, think about this. We're all sort of in self-isolation right now. And that is really hard, by the way, for people in our industry, because most of us are extroverts, vivacious. We like human connection. We like, riding rides together. So I think when this does lift and the doors do open, I feel certain that people are going to go and support the establishments. And I really believe that the first 20% of those fannies through the turnstile are your biggest fans. Right. And then when they leave and they tell everybody what a great experience they had, how safe it was, how clean, how fun, how much they needed this, that it's going to push everybody else back in. So we'll have some recovering to do, but I believe we will recover.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that the first people who visit you when you reopen are your biggest fans, your most loyal, and are so important to use those guests as your advocates to be able to kind of turbocharge this recovery process. What does the communication look like? Let's say we're on the other side of this. Hopefully it's sooner rather than later. When parks and when FECs and when attractions start reopening, and it's one thing to have a standard of health and safety and sanitation and cleanliness, and then the other is really making sure that perception is very well received. So from a communication standpoint, what are parks able to do to make sure that standard is stressed to guests so that they know and that they feel confident and reassured to come back?
I think visuals are very important. If you're bold enough to invite key reporters or media in to take pictures and or video, or writers to write and show them how you clean your equipment. I mean, it's almost the same thing as like, Matt, like before we'll open a amusement park and we want to do a mock drill, right? And we might incorporate like police, firefighters, people that don't mind being hung upside down safely while they get rescued. And then you invite the reporter to see how great you did with the rescue. I mean, it's a bold move, and some parks do it and some don't for fear of getting it wrong, and then it's wrong on camera. But the ones that do it right, and it is, wow, they get the accolades. So I think, right before you open, and you want to line these stories up and put them in the queue, by the way. But, a series of stories of what we're doing before we open the doors. And it becomes like maybe a 3-part package for a broadcaster in your market that you have a trusted relationship with. And you invite them in to show you your prep work before you open. And then, hey, be there for the opening. So I just think visuals are uber important in this time that we're living in.
And then, is there such a thing as overkill with communication from this standpoint? Because if we're talking about something that is such a high concern, everything leading into this crisis, everything prior to that is, you don't want to advertise how clean you are, or you don't want to advertise how safe you are, because it should be something that is just, normally felt.
Right.
Airlines don't often, boast saying, come fly with us because we're so safe. You almost don't want that in people's minds.
Right.
Granted, there are ways, there are a number of ways to communicate that, whether it's airlines or, auto manufacturers or something like that. Is there a way, I guess, at that point that operators might get it wrong in communicating too much or communicating the message that almost puts more fear into the guest?
It is my belief that you have to hit them over the head with it right now. I don't think you back down at all on this one. I think it's full steam ahead. Talk about it as much as you want. You know, show them more than showing people is more important, but in this circumstance. But if your pitch to the media right now doesn't have some tie into COVID-19, it ain't making the air. So I'm pivoting right now. Let's go to a different client of mine. The city of Panama City, Florida, right? Almost 18 months ago was hit by Hurricane Michael. Still hasn't fully recovered from Hurricane Michael, and they're still waiting on a lot of FEMA money and disaster relief funds, and now they get hit by COVID-19. So my job was to make sure that they haven't been forgotten about through the national media in Washington. But then COVID-19 hits. So they're like, what do we do now? Because they have Hurricane Michael fatigue. And I said, listen, let's pitch what you learned from Hurricane Michael that can help people going through COVID-19. Things people haven't heard, lessons learned. So point being that people that are in public relations, maybe not even crisis, you don't stand a chance unless you can find a way to tie COVID-19 into your pitches, or they just won't get picked up. I think IAP is doing a beautiful job of this, the way they're covering it. They're giving all of us templates and playbooks, and well, they're templates of like plug and play information for maybe some of the smaller folks and operators out there that don't have PR firms or slick agencies. They're really hand holding everybody in the industry through this, and they've done a great job.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. Go ahead, Josh. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say that I've started to see some of those messages and communications from destinations that are weaving in COVID-19 without being overly blatant about it. And I think this was maybe about a week or so ago. I live in Chicago, and we saw an ad here from Las Vegas that was this really simple commercial. It was this drone footage over the strip at night, and the pure message was, when you're ready, we're ready. It was like, we know that booking a flight to Vegas is not top of mind right now. And it wasn't saying anything about, hey, we're making sure all of our hotels and our casinos and our streets are clean and all of that. But it was more so just, when you're ready to come back, we'll be ready to serve you.
And that is beautiful because it's simple and heartfelt, which speaks to Matt's question about tone.
Yeah.
And I think it goes to the fact that they're in it as well as we are, right? They're not just sitting back waiting. They're also going through this at the same time. So I think it kind of goes back to that piece as well. I want to switch gears just for, did you have something else, Carolyn? Go ahead.
No, you asked the question, but I want to talk about the 3 V's. This is something like I never really share with anybody but media training, but it might be applicable in this conversation.
Let's do it.
But I'll let Matt fire away first.
No. You go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, I mean, have you guys heard of the 3 V's? There's always a victim, a villain, and a vindicator in a crisis, right? So let's just play it out. So who's the victim in this one?
Literally everyone.
Right. Who's the villain?
The disease?
Yeah, COVID-19. And who's going to be the vindicator?
Josh.
Josh is the correct answer, because the media likes to play the role of the vindicator, and we're all sort of journalists, right, these days. So what can we do to help the media vindicate? That's our role, right? People that are protecting our business. So we have a chance to really be heroes here and do what we can. At least to set up our CEOs as heroes, I should say, in the world of public relations.
Right.
Sure. Well, and that was actually part of my question that I was going to ask, because in your world of public relations, and we talked about this a little bit beforehand, that we're all travelers, for work, and now we're at home, and Josh and I have talked a lot about working from home. So besides the fact that you get to sit in front of Fury 325, how has your world changed now working from home?
Well, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to practice what I preach. I'm definitely losing income because a lot of my companies, I go to their facilities and I train them. It's media training for if and when. It's companies being proactive. And I'm having a hard time convincing them that it can be effective this way. I'm crippled like everybody else, so I'm doing what I can, but it stinks not being able to travel. It's definitely hurting my business, and I'm trying to be like all of, you guys and everybody else and look on the bright side of things,
Yeah.
which is I'm still employed in other facets. But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Any lasting final thoughts for our audience as far as being able to get through this?
Oh, take a deep breath. I mean, I know we are going to recover. It's going to take time, and we're in the coping phase right now. And there's definitely a bell curve. I mean, people are going to eventually get angry, and they're going to feel caged and, maybe depressed. And so I know you guys have done a lot of work from home kind of shows. I keep a schedule. It keeps me sane. I try and get up and get dressed, eat breakfast. I set my alarm like I'm really going to work, you know what I mean? And I get in front of the computer because I do believe that there still are expectations of us, and I don't want to lose my mind. So taking breaks also, I think, is key to keeping your sanity throughout this.
Well
I
said.
hope
Thank
that helped
you.
a little bit. If people can find me on LinkedIn, and I'll answer more questions for them under my name, Carolyn McLean.
Absolutely. That was going to be my next question. Yeah.
Oh,
Thanks so much.
I beat you to
No.
the tag. I'm sorry.
No, we really appreciate your time today and for sharing these insights, and best of luck to you. And we're all I feel like I've heard this 1,000 times over the last 2 weeks, but we're all in this together. We're going to get through this together, and we're going to come out of this bigger and better than ever. So stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks so much.
Peace.